Hello, everyone. Welcome to this discussion of HRDAG's recent statement. I'm very happy to see so many familiar faces from around the world here to chat a little bit about the thinking behind that, the content, and what this means both for HRDAG and for anybody else who feels sympathetic to that statement or wishes to participate in a similar action in their own organization or community. My name is Daniel Bryan. I'm facilitating, but the really important people here are, of course, the leaders of HRDAG, Megan, and Patrick. So without further ado, I guess I have a few questions for you both. We'll probably take about 20 minutes to talk this through, but as I say, we have a very illustrious audience here. Anybody who wants to sort of participate, chip in, ask other questions, feel free to do so. So I don't know which one of you wants to start because I'm not sure the genesis of this statement, but what does this statement really mean for HRDAG? I mean, you're quite well known as a very much a non-partisan, science-based organization. This seems a bit of a step away from that, or is it, Megan?
Yeah, well, I can start, but I think definitely Patrick should jump in. I don't think this is a step away from that. I think this really is an articulation and an affirmation that really started, to each other, and that now we're doing for everyone else of the foundation of our work. We always look to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to not only motivate and drive our work, but also to really clarify our purpose and to clarify our thinking around why this project, why not that project. And it always steers us right. And so in this moment that can feel very challenging and at times chaotic, having this real clarity that we can turn to and that we can say to each other, this is the reason why this piece of work, this is the reason why we're going to lean in this direction, has been, for me personally, and hopefully for us as an organization, incredibly useful. And it's really given us that language to have those conversations around what is most important for us to focus on and to do in this moment. And I know Patrick has some bigger picture thoughts about that.
I'm Patrick Ball. I'm the Director of Research at the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. And it's now been 35 odd years that I've been working in human rights projects, largely in transitional justice, in some sense, cleaning up after dictatorships and civil wars with truth commissions, tribunals, or non-governmental advocacy campaigns, or in the best case, all three together. And there's a couple things that I think come from that experience that inform this moment. The first thing that I keep coming back to is that there will be a moment of transitional justice, that moments of anti-democratic government don't stick in countries that have had democratic traditions. If you don't have a democratic tradition in your country, then you can have all the dictatorship you like, and those things can go on for indeed millennia. But in countries that have a democratic tradition, there's always a regression to the mean. There's always a regression to the democratic norm, which will eventually come to the United States. And so people have asked me for 35 years, well, what is it that you do during the dictatorship? What do you do during the authoritarian period? And our answer has been for decades, first, don't lose the data. That's the first thing you do, because there will be an accounting. And the key here is to position ourselves for that and to think about that. Well, as Megan led with, the first thing to position yourself with is your principles and your values. So let's remember what those principles and values are. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights gives us exactly that framing, those principles and these values. And so when we began talking among ourselves about, well, what will we do at the Human Rights Data Analysis Group in the next years as we weather this authoritarian period, we first said, well, let's think about it in terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. First of all, why do we think this is an authoritarian period? Well, we think it is because the actions of this administration are violating fundamental human rights articulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Not human rights in a general sense, but human rights in the specific sense of these articles. And we'll touch on a tiny bit of that, I think, through this conversation. And then the second thing we came back to is, well, what do we think we should do? What is our role? What are our responsibilities? And then what that comes to is, what are we willing to risk? And that's where this statement comes from. We faced a couple of early concerns back months ago, thinking about, well, if we do these things, we can imagine that the administration might attempt to retaliate against us unjustly, and we believe illegally, but nonetheless, we should think about what that retaliation might be and what that might imply for us. And we should not do so lightly. We should not undertake that thinking or take those risks in a casual or sloppy way. No, we're scientists, we're methodical, we're careful. First we talk about it with our colleagues, we make sure that we're all on the same page. Then we make a plan with our friends who are lawyers to make sure that what we're doing is in fact is appropriate and legal. And we always search within ourselves, what is our core? What are our values? And so this statement comes from that process. And I'm delighted that at the end of this brief conversation, three of our colleagues from the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, Sam, Ayub, and Maria, will comment and speak to a little bit what it meant to them as members of the HRDAG to be part of this statement.
So you talked a little bit about the timing there, and of course, this isn't something this happens several months into this administration. Was there any particular event that sort of prompted this particular start of thinking, or triggered that moment where you went from, okay, let's prepare internally, to making more of a public statement?
I think there were a whole series of events. I think the first sort of level of event is that when governments arrest people and then refuse to acknowledge the arrest, that's a disappearance. And one of the things that has been among the centerpieces of HRDAG's work for decades, the first database I ever made in El Salvador was a database of disappeared people in 1991. And I was helping other groups. I was a kid. It was a long time ago. And though I'm very old, it turns out that 35 years ago, even an old person was a kid. But we were busily building these databases precisely because the point of a disappearance is that the government wants you to forget people. That's why it happens. That's why a government uses this tactic specifically, is to have people be forgotten. And the obvious response to that is to not forget, to remember. And that's something that I learned over the course of the intervening decades, that this notion of memory, the notion of remembering violence and remembering the people who've suffered violence and remembering the people who did it, to hold them accountable, is the center of transitional justice, and in my opinion, is the center of human rights work. So as ICE began to detain people and then fail to acknowledge their detentions, this was a big flag. This is a disappearance. And this said to us, this is something we have to respond to. We have to think about how we're going to do something about it. And to be candid with everyone here, I don't think we have done much about disappearances yet. And that's something that we need to keep engaging. We need to keep finding ways to do. But it was a trigger for us to think about this moment in the United States. And then at a very personal level, I'm an alumnus of Columbia University. And so when the university attacked Columbia and has now forced Columbia to accept inappropriate, in my belief, terms that attack the heart of academic freedom, well, this hit another of HRDAG's core principles, which is scientific freedom and responsibility, the importance of speaking the truth, using our methods and using our disciplines, the insights that come from our disciplines, from epidemiology, from mathematical statistics, from applied statistics, from software engineering. All of these pieces have to come together. Well, you attack those things, what does truth mean? So because we are committed to the truth, this was another of our signals. Megan, do you have others that we should bring in here?
Yeah, well, just to mention a couple of other specific examples, there were some executive orders and then some actions stemming from those executive orders that struck very close to our work. And so there was the executive order around the International Criminal Court and then the ensuing sanctions of various prosecutors. And we work very closely on various cases with the ICC. And so that was one of the events that triggered a lot of conversations with lawyers to clarify, what steps did we need to be taking and which pieces of work were at risk in that particular context. And then the other executive order that I just want to mention is from April of this year. And I just want to read the title because it's so amazing. Strengthening and Unleashing America's Law Enforcement to Pursue Criminals and Protect Innocent Citizens. And a lot of the work that we do inside and outside the United States is holding institutions accountable when they violate human rights. And a lot of the work in the US, those institutions are the police and various branches of the criminal legal system. And this executive order in particular felt like a real challenge to a lot of that work that we and our partners are pursuing, trying to hold those actors accountable when they violate human rights. So just a couple of other specific examples.
So one thing in your statement that really struck me was your discussion about sort of how you had operated in the past. And there was very much a sense that HRDAG, while along with all these other organizations do work globally, there was a sense in which you took advantage of the privilege of having a base in the United States to recollect, keep this data safe and be relatively well protected from, as you say, retaliation from those that data collection and analysis might affect. The statement sort of makes it clear that you no longer feel that that is necessarily the case. And I wonder, in that sort of flip where you go from being an organization that takes advantage of your own background and location to assist other people, what you've learned from your experience working very closely with groups in authoritarian states about what happens now, like what kind of preparation as an organization and an institution do you need to do in a moment like this, and also like what should people expect, right? What should I think a lot of people are very unclear about what might happen now because it's not something that they've been experienced with in their generation. So there's the statement, and the statement is part of a course of action for HRDAG. What else are you thinking about? What are you expecting? And how are you planning to respond to that, Patrick?
Well, we got to do the thing that we've been telling everybody else to do for the last 30 odd years, which is that we need to not lose the data. And so let's start with our own data. Let's make sure that our own data can be safely guaranteed outside the United States, outside the reach of US authorities. Let's also now help our partners, help our colleagues and our partners. So this is the beginning of us reaching out to all of our partners who we've been working with for the last, especially the ones we've been working with recently. I'm delighted to see some of you here on the call today, and I can't wait to get to know you even better, to help you store your data in secure ways outside of the destructive reach of US law enforcement. The threat model that we are considering is not, will the government see the data? Because in almost all of our big projects now, the data is semi-public, but rather, will the government deny us access to the data? Will they destroy our access, take away our technology, seize the computers, or freeze our access if we are depending on big tech companies to store our data? So those are, I think, our next actions at a technical level, because we are fundamentally a technical organization. We are a scientific and technical group, and so we should focus on the things that we do very, very well. with our and help our partners do those things really well too. Megan, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, as Patrick said, given our work and our background, our focus on the data has really been forefront for us. But the other piece of that, and I think a lot of us have probably been on some of those conference calls with friends and colleagues at the ACLU and the National Council of Nonprofits, the other piece of that is kind of buttoning up compliance issues and just making sure that everything kind of in the running of the house is all current and up to date and ready to go, and that we have all the necessary sort of systems and processes in place to make sure that we are following all of the letters of the law in terms of running as an institution and as a nonprofit. So I think that's the other piece of kind of preparing, is just making sure that those I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
So you talked a little bit about that, about sort of internal discussions with everybody working at HRDAG and kind of having an overall approach. And this is clearly a statement that comes from everybody. I wonder if we could just sort of widen this out a little bit and hear from your colleagues. So I think we have you, Sam and Marja. I'm going to just randomly pick someone, and maybe if you can talk a little bit here about like what your if there's a particular part of this statement that you wanted to ensure got out, and also how you're thinking about and preparing for the next few years. Maybe we could start with Ayub first.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I just want to thank Patrick, Megan, Suzanne, Tarek, Bailey, and the entire team for including me in the process. I've worked and have continued to work with many local and regionally based organizations. And unsurprisingly, many of them have yet to put out a public statement of condemnation. From what I understand, this is largely because of their close financial ties to government funding sources, which I think is understandable, but I would argue very counterproductive given the moment. And so I'm just I feel very grateful to be a part of the HRDAG because of its commitment to public condemnation. I don't think I have there's no particular part of the statement that I think is particularly valuable. I think it's the statement in itself that has the most value. The other reason that I really value being a part of this process is a bit more theoretical. I think that human rights by nature are largely an imaginary force, right? And it's through individual action, in addition to things like codification and legal standing, that they gain life. My hope is that this statement marks the first of many actions that we take to transform human rights from theory into reality. And for that reason, I don't think I have there's no particular section of the statement that is particularly important to me. It's really just the act of putting out the statement itself. Thank you.
Sam, do you want to chip in?
Thanks for including me. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Vermont. And like Patrick and Megan said, this is not something I do lightly, right? As a statistician, there is such a value on being scientific and objective. And I'd like to think through why it is that it's not in contradiction with those values to co-sign a statement like this, right? The scientific enterprise is fundamentally in service of humanity. And when our core values like academic freedom are under attack, as scientists, we have to think more deeply about what our profession calls us to do. And HRDAG has been a guiding light, not just for me, but if I may say so, for an entire community of applied statisticians, not just in methods, but particularly in morals and what types of problems are the most important to work on and how to engage with them. So to be frank, when Patrick and Megan invited me to participate in this process, even though this isn't something I take lightly, it hardly took me any time at all to see that this was the right thing to do. I agree with the whole statement wholeheartedly. Thanks.
And I pass the baton to Maria, if you're, let's see. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be in community with you all today. I think I want to say two things. So the first thing for me is, being part of this process, to me, being in solidarity with everyone at HRDAG is sort of, I don't want to say an antidote, but helps with all of the uncertainties that I think have come with the present moment. And just having really clear what our principles are, at least makes me clear on how I feel about myself and my work, even if I'm not clear on the world around me. And I think that has been like a really powerful tool for myself, just understanding and interpreting the things that I've been confronted with from day to day. More related to the content of the letter, it was really important to me that we connected the letter to Article 27 and to our right to both produce scientific knowledge and also to enjoy its benefits. This, I think, from my opinion, is one of the more underappreciated aspects of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but I think it is what gives HRDAG's work a lot of its legs. And Megan, you use this term in reviews that what we do is statistical accompaniment. And I think about this all the time. And the idea that our statistical accompaniment we do with partners has no legs if we don't have freedom to produce knowledge, to produce science. And to me, it was so important to connect what we were thinking about and other more commonly recognized human rights, like the right to freedom of speech and freedom of association, to our right to science in this moment where so many scientific enterprises in the US are being attacked, from federal scientists to federal data and universities. And I think this statement sings, and it brings me so much joy that we could connect all of the dots together and put this out.
Thank you. So I think that's presented sort of this, a lot of the internal view of the statement, I think, and it reflects, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of your work, which is this is focused on data science and the role of data scientists in establishing the truth in contested or human rights related matters. I think that there's a question here also of how it helps orientate a group to what they should do. But there's that other part that Sam talked about, which is connecting us. It's clear that this statement isn't just intended to be a statement. It goes along with action. And I guess my just wrapping up question before we sort of move on to a wider discussion is, what do you hope for? What do you anticipate happening as a result of this statement? And what would you like other people to take away from this? I'll throw this to Patrick.
I think that history teaches the only way societies live at peace is in a framework where rights are mutually respected. All other forms of government require some kind of domination of one group or one idea over everybody else. This one does not. This one allows everybody to have their own ideas, and so we can live at peace. Indeed, this is exactly what the preamble of the Universal Declaration says. It explicitly outlines this deal. I believe this, and I believe this after decades and decades of looking at how authoritarian governments and civil wars end. So my hope for this statement is to invite other groups that think of themselves as civil liberties, civil rights, human rights promoting organizations to return to this touchstone, to return to this document and think about our work and our values in the context of the Declaration, of the Universal Declaration, and say, what do we believe? This is what we believe. And then pick an article or two or three, as we've done, and highlight them as critical for your beliefs and your mission. And we would love to sit with you and have those conversations and help you formulate those statements. We're not proposing that others sign on to our statement. This is our statement. This is what we believe. And other groups will all have their own takes on it. But our idea that what we're hoping to inspire is more conversation and public statement public affirmation of values that are centered on the Universal Declaration. It really is perhaps the most extraordinary document in human history. Simple, not especially long, very straightforward, easy to read, and quite profound. And also, not just a good idea. Every member state by the UN is bound by these articles. It's the law. So there we are.
I think on that note, we can probably wrap up. The statement is online now, and so if you are joining us having read it, go back and read it. There's a little bit at the bottom where it suggests actions that you can take, and there's an email address, info@hrdag.org, if you would like to continue this conversation. But thank you for joining us.